And we are live. Adam, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
So, a quick reminder for those who have just joined us. Welcome to Pride in the Living Room, Jewmos edition. So, this project was originally founded by the Israeli LGBT task force Agudah in memory of the 2009 Tel Aviv Gay Center shooting and the Jerusalem Pride Parade stabbing in 2015. And Ha'agudah created this initiative to offer a stage and a voice for LGBT Jews from around the world to share their stories. And it is my pleasure to welcome Adam to the stage. Adam, over to you.
Hi guys. Well, thank you for having me here. I live in London, and I guess so. My story is. I always think my story is. Well, I think every story is unique, of course. But my story, I think, from living. For so many years and hearing other people's stories is fairly unusual in that I'm bisexual. I identify as being bisexual, and there's something unique that comes with that. I think that you can grow up and not know in a way that if you follow what society tells you and shows you and guides you, then you can be quite happy in your skin, and maybe not ever address the other side of your sexuality and be quite happy. Whereas I think if you grow up, first of all, I think if you're gay, perhaps, or this is my sort of a reference point from my gay friends, very, very early on, and perhaps relationships with the opposite gender are less successful. So my experience of growing up was fairly, inverted commas, normal, in that society shows you a certain way. If I think about my my family in terms of their faith and being Jewish and growing up, they tend to agree with society on around homosexuality. I didn't really know anything. I didn't understand or know what homosexuality was. Actually, I just knew that there was something that was very bad in terms of my family, something outside of normal sexuality that we didn't talk of, and wasn't and was bad, and you shouldn't go and you shouldn't speak of it, or so I went through my teens, quite puberty and those with girlfriends, and being content and that's what I meant, what I said earlier, that being bisexual, I guess half of my sexuality was completely content with that and happy with that, and not knowing that there was anything else was meant that I was fairly happy, and there were no indications or signs that that I needed to look for anything else to make me happy. And so I think the first time I understood, and this seems really weird now and late, the first experience I had of another sexuality, of homosexuality, was probably at college when I was 18, and there was a gay guy in my class, and it came as quite a shock to me. He was going out with another guy in the class, and that came as a shock to me. I didn't really understand it, but I totally accepted it, and I thought, well, that's really cool and that's really fine, and that's what life gives you all sorts. And But it sort of, yeah. Actually, going back now, there's something I missed that all through school. Yeah, actually, this is quite important, I guess. That I guess what did make me different was that I wasn't typically boyish in that I didn't really like football. I didn't actually really like hanging out with the boys really, because they played football and talked about football, and I really wasn't interested in it at all. And so I found them quite shallow, boys quite shallow, and I found that girls were a bit more interesting, and I would probably prefer to hang out with girls. And then I remember that I was sometimes teased for being a puff. Someone called me that, I think, even in junior school, and I found that really upsetting, actually. That really questioned my masculinity, and I think I got that all through school. It popped up every now and again, and I tried very hard to be a lad, but it didn't suit me, and it wasn't authentic. But I just thought I should fit in, as you do when you are going through those teenage years, or when being in part of a group is very important. Fitting in and being accepted is very important. But I don't think that linked in with sexuality necessarily. That was just about, I think that was just about gender and about questioning my own feeling of being a man and growing up to be a man. And so I found that all really difficult. And I knew that was a really bad thing to be, because of what I said at the beginning, society and family. And I certainly didn't want to be shunned. So then moving to college, and that was an eye-opener in lots of ways. And as I said, there was that boy in my class, and he was gay, and I was very comfortable with that, but it didn't open, it didn't really stir anything in me in terms of questions, or and I just assumed. By this time I had a girlfriend. I'd had girlfriends all through my those years. I was sort of a serial monogamist, actually, through all my youth. I had girlfriends, quite untypical really, because most of my friends were sort of playing the field and having fun, and I just tended to have single relationships with girls. And then I'm going to jump many years, and when I was 25, so I had a girlfriend at that time, and I was on the just moving out of home, and I moved in with a friend of mine who was gay, Matthew. He had a room in his flat, and I went to live there as a tenant, and I stayed with him for many years. I think a couple of years I was renting the space, watching his lifestyle and watching his gay friends come in and out, and sometimes they dress up and do drag, and I found it fun and liberating and joyful, and I still had my girlfriend. He would set me up with girls that he knew, and through those years, most of those were pretty unsuccessful, actually, short-term things. Secretly, I didn't know, and that was even more generous of him, because secretly he loved me very much, and fancied me, and he didn't give that away. That was secret, actually, and so that was quite something to be sacrificing that in a way, and as I say, setting me up with various girls that he knew, and very sweet of him. And then I decided that one night I would go out with them to a gay club and see what that was like, because they were always doing that, and I thought I was missing out on something and thought that would be cool. And I remember that for the first time going into a gay space, only men, knowing everybody was gay and feeling comfortable and slightly, it was kind of quite weird for me and unusual and exciting and fun. And I remember the atmosphere. That's what I remember more, most really, was the difference between growing up and going into sort of what I call perhaps straight clubs and places where always felt an undercurrent of something uncomfortable, sometimes to varying degrees, sometimes more, sometimes less. But in this space, there was none. There was no undercurrent. No. It was just a joyful space. There was no threat, and I really enjoyed that space. And as I say, felt really comfortable in that space. And I think I did that a few more times. And then there was one time where just Matthew, because usually we'd go with Matthew and his friends, and one time we just went together. And I think we had taken some ecstasy or something and got quite high, and we came home, and I said to Matthew, would you like to stay with me tonight? I mean, it was his house and we had separate rooms. He was upstairs. And he sweetly said, yeah, and started making a space on the floor for him to sleep in my bedroom. It's not what I meant. I meant for him to stay in my bed. And I said, why are you, I meant in my bed. And his very sweet moment, his face lit up, and he joined me in my bed, and there in that moment, I think our relationship began. It began in that moment. We broke that spell of being separate, and that sort of opened for me Pandora's box. And I remember from that night, the next day wasn't awkward, but it was sort of, I was like, oh shit, okay. And I remember that being an incredibly confusing time for me in my life. At 25, I'd had a full-on gay experience with someone that I actually loved anyway as a friend. I think opening that door opened my heart, and I sort of was falling in love on a much deeper level with Matthew. And but that was incredibly confusing, because then you have to question everything that you had known before for the last 25 years. And I had to try and understand who I was and what my sexuality was. And I assumed, therefore, I was now gay. And that didn't feel accurate if I needed to describe myself as something, because I still had thoughts about women. And looking back, as I said earlier, that all those girlfriends were very all equally joyful experiences and relationships, and they were successful, they were happy. And so that didn't make sense, because surely those wouldn't be, there would have been some indication that they weren't right, and they were right. And so I went on a long journey, and I went exploring into the world, and I got myself a psychiatrist who I stayed with for very, very many years. I found a group in, I think I joined several groups. I think I joined a Jewish gay group in London. I joined a group, I think it called itself London Friend at the time, and they were operating out of Caledonian Road. They were meeting every week, and it was a bisexual group, and I thought, I'll see what that means. I don't know how I got that even that word in my head because I'd never even encountered the word bisexual. I think I must have read it when I was trying to work out what I was. And I went to that group, and I remember thinking in one of the first meetings there, when people were talking about their experiences, and that's the importance of talking about your experience. As everybody started talking, you know, some were married, some were older people, all generations and sexualities and genders, and they were talking about their experiences, and I thought, wow, this is it. This is what I am. I feel very comfortable here, and I feel this is all making sense to me. You know, there's a married man who has sex with men, and his wife knows he's not very happy with it, but blah blah blah. And I thought, okay, this is what I am. I'm a bisexual. That's what I am. And that, although, you know, labels are weird and unnecessary sometimes, but when you're trying to discover who you are, for me, it was very helpful at the time, because I just wanted to understand how then perhaps how society would see me and view me. And that made sense and helped, along with therapy. I was going through some other stuff at the time. I just met my father for the first time also in 25 years. He'd left when I was a child. And so that was an interesting time in my life. That sort of, you know, I covered those aspects of that when I was also the same age. And I ended up in a 4-year, very happy relationship with my landlord, with Matthew, who I still see as a friend. But that was a great entry into my life and being authentic as a bisexual man, and living authentically and happy. And they were they were happy years, very happy years. And our love was very deep and powerful. The next part of those years, I then, and after having discovered the label and being comfortable with who I was, I could then, I think I needed to do that first before I then could inform everybody else in my life. I think I needed to understand fully who I was. And then it was all very systematic. Then I sort of made a mental list of the people I should tell. Well, I wanted to tell everybody because I think that was everybody needed to know. I think the mental list was the order of who I should tell, or what order. And I think I went with the easiest first. Now, thinking back now, I think I should have done the hardest first. But I did the easiest first, and then in my head worked all the way to the hardest person to tell. The easiest person to tell was my brother. And I remember walking with him one wintry day over, actually really in a park in Stoke Newington. It's very near to where your family are from. I think it's Clissold Park or Springfield Park. It borders Stoke Newington, I think. And I told him as we were walking, and he was very sweet. I knew he would be, and very loving. And that made it very easy for me to slowly work through. It was a good start. I got a very good response. And then I worked through my ex-girlfriends one at a time. As I say, in order of my perceived easiness, who would be the most easy to tell, to come out to. I went through my most recent girlfriend, and she was quite surprised. She was actually quite surprised and not surprised. She was my girlfriend when I first moved in with Matthew, so she knew Matthew really well, and I think she said that it was really great that it was Matthew that came into the fold with Matthew, and she thought it was a very lovely combination of people. And then I went through friends, no other family members actually. The hardest people, and this was over the space of, I think, a year, a whole year. I went through all of those people, ending in, well, the last two people, the hardest two people, was my best male friend, who I thought would be tricky, and my parents, which I knew would be incredibly tricky. I told my best male friend, and he was okay, a bit shocked, I think, actually. I'm surprised people were shocked because I'm not exactly the most butch kind of guy. But anyway, he seemed okay. I think he needed time to think about it, but he was generally okay. And it was quite tough. I think it was just quite tough for me to tell him that. I guess because he was really sort of very masculine and very male and testosterone driven. And maybe that's why I thought it would be really tough, because that would put me in a weaker position, and maybe the resonance of growing up being called a puff, maybe affected that. I don't know. And then telling my mum, which I did. I had to build up to that. I think I called her over to Matthew's flat, well, our flat, and she assumed that we were still landlord and tenant. I told her that I was bisexual, confidently told her I was bisexual because I could say that, and that my partner was Matthew, and she burst out crying. She said a few pretty harsh things in that moment. She said, "We must find the best doctor to cure you of this terrible thing." She said, "You're not to tell anybody. You're not to tell your father. You're not to tell your grandmother, and definitely don't tell your other." I've got another brother and sister who had small children at the time. She said, "Don't tell your brother and sister because they won't let you anywhere near the children," which threw me a bit. And then she ran off home crying. And so it was a difficult time. She actually went home, I think, and told her mum, because they were very close, and I don't think she could keep anything from her, and my grandmother was kind of a bit better equipped to deal with it than her. And she told my dad, and I think he was better equipped to deal with it than she was. But it took many years of, well, actually, I don't think it's ever been something that sits comfortably with them. Moving through, I always wanted to have children. Matthew didn't want to have children, and anyway, I kind of felt that we'd been together for 4 years, and it was time for me to move on. And it sort of naturally moved on, and I split from the relationship. I ended the relationship not for any other reason than it. I hadn't fallen really out of love with him, but it just felt right that I should move on, I was missing women, actually. I think that was something quite important. I was missing women. I was missing, and I thought that, as I say, I was wanting to have children. And I did explore at that time, at the end of our relationship, how I could have a child within the gay community. I used various sites and means. I went through adoption channels, fostering channels, and seeking and co-parenting as an option with lesbian couples, or even sperm donor, with the intention of being a part of the you know, growing the child's development. I was on that path, and I was anyway, and I was sort of single and hoping to meet a girl and a woman, and I met another guy called Andy, and I was I won't really go into that relationship. It was a very challenging, difficult relationship, but I was with him for 4 years. So I had really mainly these two boyfriends, Matthew and then Andy, for 4 years each, and both very different. And as I said, that was quite challenging. There's nothing I need to really go into in that relationship, but other than you know, throughout those years, I guess being exposed to a gay sort of lifestyle, really. I went to gay clubs, and, you know, and that's mixed with just mainly, well, no, all different actually sexualities I mix with, but yeah. And then after that relationship ended quite horribly, again, I was sort of by myself and not wanting to be in any sort of relationship, actually. I remember thinking in that time, feeling very sort of, I think because that second relationship was quite hard and difficult, and there was lots of lies and deceit and pain within that. I felt that was it for me, and I didn't ever want to go out with another guy. You can't really base all men on one guy, but I think I did at the time. I never wanted to go out with another guy again. I felt completely like there's no woman that would take on a bisexual, because when you are, it's not like it goes away. And that's the thing about, I think, bisexuality. It's like if I entered into a relationship with a woman, it's like I wouldn't then stop wanting to have sexual relations with men. It doesn't go away. It's the same as when I was with those two guys. I had, you know, I didn't have any sex with women during those times, but I kind of wanted to. And I just wanted to be by myself, and this woman popped up, this woman Laura, who popped up, and we went out. I wasn't really up for dating, but we went out. I just thought I just wanted to get out of the house, actually, because I was living with my parents at the time. I had to go back and live with my parents because I just sold my flat. We went out, and it seemed like something that was going to be something. And I remember saying to her that I had to, within 3 dates, I said, look, I need to tell you something. And it was on the phone, and I said, like, you need to perhaps, let's meet, and I need to tell you something quite important if we are to go any further in this relationship, because, as I said, the previous relationship was full of deceit, and I've always been pretty open about who I am and what I am and my intentions. And so I said, like, I need to tell you something pretty important if we are to continue. And she came around to me, and I said, look, well, she guessed a whole number of things which were all wrong. And I said, no, I'm bisexual. And she burst out laughing, actually, which was a really good response. And she said, okay, I'm going to go away and think about whether that's something I can deal with. And I think she fully understood that what I previously just said, that being bisexual, if I were to go out with her, like the other side of my sexuality doesn't go away. It's still there. So she did go away, and she did come back, and she said, okay, that's fine. You can be bisexual. I'm happy to continue the relationship. And gosh, where are we now? well, there's a big thing that I missed out. So I also told her that yeah, I was in the process of going through adoption. Well, not actually adoption, but looking into adoption or fostering, and I wanted a child. She already had 2 children. She was coming out of a divorce, or going through a divorce rather. She had 2 children, and maybe even 6 months into the relationship, she said, "Look, I don't mind being that sort of co-parent with you. I'll have your child with you." And I was like, well, it's the last thing I expected, because I just thought, okay, she's done her children. She didn't really, but she actually really wanted to. And my daughter is now 13 years old, and and she's absolutely amazing. And we've been together for 15 years, which is a long time. And I'm still bisexual, and we have a very unique relationship. And actually allows me to be bisexual. And I'm not sure I ever thought that was possible. And I guess I'm very lucky to be in that position. But honesty was I think the key to that, because there's so many guys that I know or meet that you know, that have to do or address perhaps that part of their sexuality secretly, or you know, or discreetly at the least, but mainly secretly. And I don't have to do that, and I think that would be really challenging for me. So it's open and honest, and you know, she's incredibly understanding, and I guess that's why perhaps we've stayed together so long. And that sort of brings me to like now. And there's another big part of it, and that I've missed out really, which is the emotional aspect of all of that. And I only really discovered, sorry, have I gone on too long? It's all right to carry on. The emotional aspect of that, I only really discovered through loads of inner work. I mean, I've always done sort of inner spiritual work throughout, and all those years with my therapist, actually quite scarily, 25 years of therapy. And only probably last year did I really scrape through into the feelings of self-hatred that I had for myself, of being who I am. And I was kind of living with that, and sort of, it was quite, it must have been very deep. And it probably goes back right to the beginning of being, you know, of school and your family and society that says it's the wrong thing to be, and that it's sort of an abomination, really. And so I had a very deep-rooted self-hatred, and my journey, my spiritual journey, I suppose, that's run alongside the rest, the sort of the stuff that is out there on the surface, which you can deal with in a certain way. The spiritual journey is much more, it's much deeper and much more perhaps profound, and finding that self-hatred even shocked me, I think. But finding it is very useful, because once you've identified it, then you can address it, at least. And I spent a long time addressing those feelings, and with the intention of arriving at a space where I can be 100% happy with who I am. And I think this time last year, and this is perhaps an indication, this time last year I would never be able to speak about who I am online, or to anybody really. I mean, people knew I've always been out, and I make fun of my you know, that side of my sexuality with humor. I guess I've always dealt with difficulty with humor, and that's how I deal with my stuff. And so I can laugh at myself being a bit gay, but yeah, getting to that point of self-acceptance has been really important. Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sorry. I would never have been able to talk about myself and about my sexuality in this way that we're speaking now, and it's only through that extra journey of self-acceptance that has allowed me to speak about it. And so, you know, that shows me really, in a way, how far I've come, and that I don't hate myself for being who I am, and I don't hate myself for being a bisexual, for being a freak or a weirdo or all those things that I identified with along with the sexuality. And I think you know, that's probably an important journey for everybody who is a little bit different, feels different, or maybe not everybody needs to make that journey. Maybe not everybody has the self-hatred, but I certainly did. I think it might be generational. I'm older than the people I talk to about sexuality now. And maybe it's different now for them. Although I think there's still bigotry, and there's still hatred, and there's still misunderstanding. And yeah. And that's where I am. I'm a place where I'm happy with myself and happy in my skin and happy to speak about it. And I don't mind if people see and hear me.
Thank you so much, Adam, for sharing your story. I think that there are so many people who will be able to engage with your journey and will really resonate with what you're talking about. Like you were saying, there are so many people who live with bisexuality who feel like they have to repress a piece of themselves. They might have to explore that discreetly or secretly. And I think your story is really inspirational to show someone who is so authentic and pure about every piece of themselves. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thanks. That's kind of you to say. Yeah, I hope it does help. It is. I guess the message is ultimately to be at peace with yourself and to be authentic, to find a way that that works for you and that makes you happy, makes your heart happy, and then you can be more functional in the world and bring happiness to other people in the world. You know, being at peace with yourself, I think is fundamental. Knowing who you are, and that only opens your heart to everybody else, and that's can only be a good thing. An open heart is the way to live.
I just have one quick question, if that's okay.
Sure, of course.
So in honor of uh, Pride in the Living Room, uh, you know, this project is all about LGBTIQ plus Jews coming together and sharing their experiences. And um, you've so openly shared your bisexual journey. I was just wondering if you had any quick thoughts on the role that Judaism has played in your life, maybe alongside your bisexual identity or not, and what role does it play these days?
That's interesting because I felt, oh, that's kind of a whole, opens up a whole another thing. But I felt very, I obviously went through, as a Jewish born, I went through Hebrew classes all the way up to bar mitzvah, and was bar mitzvahed, and like my brother before me. And I was taught by a rabbi that was sort of close to the family, because he'd been through all our what they call simchas, weddings and bar mitzvahs and engagements, and yeah, there was lots. And I felt at 13, you asked me earlier about you know, these feelings of being bar mitzvah, and certainly at 13 I didn't have any clue about, as I said right at the beginning, I didn't really have any clue about sexuality or at all, actually. But I remember feeling when I first moved out into Walthamstow, I ironically, without knowing, moved next door to the rabbi that had sort of taken me through into adulthood, if you like, through my bar mitzvah. And I used to see him on the street, because I'd come down and walk to the station, and he would nearly always be out. And he used to always ask me, "Have you got a girlfriend?" And I think secretly he kind of knew that I wasn't straight. And I somehow, maybe it was just me, but I somehow felt that angry about Judaism and religion, that it oppresses and even scorns alternative relationships, sexualities rather. Because I know that, you know, being gay or not, or just not living a straight life, in many of the religions, it's frowned upon, at the very least frowned upon. So I felt quite rejected, and I think I consciously moved away from the religious side of Judaism, even though I've always identified with culturally being Jewish. I have a very strong cultural connection with Judaism. But I think religiously I felt that I didn't belong, that it wasn't for me, and that it doesn't, my sexuality would prevent, you know, me being any part of that. I would be rejected. And I wasn't at all, I wasn't in any way going to compromise my sexuality after it took so hard, you know, it was so difficult to address and to be authentic. I'm not going to start compromising my sexuality just for religion, for the sake of Judaism. So I kind of withdrew from the, not that I was religiously involved in Judaism anyway. As I say, I think I was more felt more culturally connected. And I did join a Jewish gay group, because I thought, well, then that's somehow worked for me. That it's sort of like two minority groups. I always found that quite interesting, that being Jewish is, I always felt quite as a minority group, and being bi or gay as another, and then why not combine those? And I remember that being part of that group, and that felt good, and the people there, it was like connecting on two levels, and that was very welcoming and very so yeah. I'm not sure I'm particularly answering your question well, but I think the cultural side of being Jewish has always run alongside my life, and I actually, Laura's Jewish, and my it wasn't, she found me, and and I don't know quite how, and but that was quite a shock. And you can imagine, for my parents at that time, that's rather funny, because obviously they were mourning. I guess they'd come to terms after 8 years of me going out with guys. They'd sort of mourn the fact that I was ever going to give them a grandchild, or be, you know, they perhaps wrote me off as a gay man. And so you can imagine that when I went home to my mum and said, I'm actually dating a girl, and by the way, she's Jewish. It's like, it's, I was going to say it's like Christmas all at one, but it's more like Hanukkah, or 2 Hanukkahs or 3 Hanukkahs all at the same time. I think she nearly fell off her chair. And and then we produced a Jewish granddaughter. So there you go. That's another Hanukkah on top of it. But so we have, we both families know. Laura's family knows about me, and we have Jewish things. We do Jewish things. We have Pesach and Friday night dinner, and so it's there. And my daughter knows about me. I'm open with my daughter, and she knows. And we watch RuPaul together, and we can camp it up together. So it's there. It's an important part of who I am. My Judaism, my cultural and my ancestry is incredibly important to me, and living it's there. It's I guess it's in the background, but sometimes it's in the moves more into the foreground than other times, as I say, in times of, if it's Pesach or something like that, or Hanukkah. And religiously, I'm kind of happy where I am. I never really, I'm one of those, can I say, I'm one of those bad Jews that sort of saw their bar mitzvah as a ticket, out, which is really bad. But there you go. I haven't said that out loud before, but but then maybe that's part of my repair as well, my inner work. But so I was never really that interested in the religious aspect, because I don't think I'm that religiously. I'm not sure about my own connection with religion generally, but culturally, I'm all for it, and I feel very proud to be Jewish, and have produced a Jewish child and live in the way that we do. Does that answer the question?
No, yeah, it does. Thank you so much, Adam, again for taking the time to take part in Pride in the Living Room.
Pleasure.
I'll say this again. I genuinely think that your story has the potential to reach out to LGBT people, to Jewish people, and offer an insight into a life, into a story, into a journey that has the power to change people's minds, and people to walk in your shoes for a little while. And so thank you so much for being here.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Do you have any final parting words?
No, I don't think so. I think I said at the at the last moment that my small philosophy, which is an open heart and authenticity for a happy life.
An open heart and authenticity for a happy life. Couldn't have said it better myself. Here's to sharing our story in this moment and many more moments in the future. Thank you.
Shalom. Shalom.